Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Radio Day 3, Wednesday, where we're talking about all sorts of disasters, cyber preparedness, what radio can do to basically keep our public informed. And I welcome a great panel here. I'm very excited for this discussion. I welcome everybody in the audience as well from all over the world, really. So thank you for joining. Just a couple administrative points. You'll see a comment section on your screen. Feel free at any time during the panel. You can enter comments and questions in, and we will see them as well, and we can answer them if they're questions or add to the discussion in general. Before we get to the introductions, I just want to read basically an overall like a preamble with that RedTech put together and that we put together that I think really captures this panel and why we're gathered here. It reads, "The stakes are high. When broadcasters go dark during emergencies, whether from natural disasters, cyber attacks, or other crises, public trust erodes. Communities rely on radio broadcasts precisely when other communication methods, whether cellular networks or internet services, fail. Our mission as radio broadcasters is to ensure broadcasters remain operational and trusted, especially during these critical moments when the public needs them the most." So I want us to, we're going to keep that in mind as we speak about this today. It's really about public safety, informing the public, and during the most critical times, whether it's environmental disasters or cybersecurity issues, and how we prepare for them and how we recover from them. So let's start with a round of introductions. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to Philippe Generali and RCS for sponsoring this event, Day 3 of Radio Week. As for introductions, so I'm Steve Schultes. I'll be moderating this panel of great professionals. I'm Chief Technology Officer with New York Public Radio. New York Public Radio has about 8 signals in the tri-state area of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. We're an affiliate of National Public Radio in New York City. I personally are on some national boards that support basically this mission of protecting and informing the public. I'm a chairman of the National Radio Systems Committee Data Services and Metadata Subcommittee, where we drafted emergency messaging protocols. I work with Roswell Clark here, who you'll be introducing himself later, under the National Association of Broadcasters Radio Technology Committee. Specifically, I'm leading the cause for modernizing the emergency alert system in the United States. With that, since I mentioned Roswell, I'll turn it over to you, Roz, for an introduction.
Thanks, Steve, and thank you for including me in this exciting panel here of professionals, of peers. One of my passions in the business is resiliency and managing through emergencies, disasters, whether small or large. But thank you for including me. It's an honor to be a part of this panel. My title is Executive Director of Radio Engineering and BCP Manager for Cox Media Group. We own approximately 60 radio stations and 10 TV stations across the United States, as well as digital channels and other forms of content and broadcast distribution, both over the air and other. So I've been in the business approximately 40 years, approaching 40 years. It doesn't seem like it. I feel like a kid still in a candy store with all of the things that we do and evolving the business. But during all of that time, I've become more and more involved in some industry things, as Steve mentioned, NAB, IEEE, NRSC, AFC. There's all sorts of alphabet soup, SBE organizations that, as part of learning and growing and then giving back to the industry, I feel it's important as we become more seasoned, I would say, that we get into those sorts of things. But part of my job at Cox Media Group is to manage the BCP, or Business Continuity Program, for the company. And that includes a variety of things to maintain the business during whatever event it may be. but also, especially as broadcasters, to maintain our operations to serve the public interest. And so we go through a variety of things, which will come later in this panel discussion that we can talk about. What is it we actually do? The why is to serve the public interest as well as maintain the business. But how we do it and what we do, that's where we kind of boil the ocean down a bit and get into things that really matter. So I'm excited to be a part of this. It's part of really what attracts me to the business in a weird way. I say, when you think of a disaster, you think of me. I don't know that's really a good thing, but I find it interesting that, when things really need to happen, when they turn to technology to make sure it happens, it's exciting in my mind that technology advancements that we have in the world has really enabled us to be greatly flexible. I know others on this panel have much to say about that, but that's what excites me, and I'm appreciative to be included in this panel. Thank you so much.
That's great, Roz. Speaking of Mr. Disaster, I don't know if you saw the comments on LinkedIn about this panel. Somebody called you the tornado magnet.
That's a compliment.
I know. Yes, absolutely. I know how you performed during like 2 Class 5 hurricanes in 2 weeks this past. So I'm sure we're going to touch on that, but it's out there. We know about you.
Okay.
All right. I want to turn to Morten Pedersen. Morten has his video off. He's in a unstable cellular area. Speaking of cellular issues. So he's going to keep his video off to maintain the bandwidth of the audio. So Morten, could you introduce yourself, please?
Well, thanks a lot, Stephen. Thanks for inviting me into this great panel of broadcast pros. It's definitely an honor to be here. My name is Morten. I'm the CTO of JFM in Denmark. I'm the head of the technical stuff for all of our radios, with the main responsibility that basically everything works and is running perfect, both studios, transmission, and all kinds of stuff. That's the short version and introduction, but that's basically my line of work.
Mm-hmm. Morten, can you tell us a little bit about, just for context, what size group is your company? Like, how many transmitters? What's generally?
Yeah,
you cover the whole country, section of the country?
Basically, we cover the whole country. We have 120 stations. We have 180 transmitter sites as it is now. And as I said, covering the entire Denmark. But again, Denmark is on the scale to US quite small. But well, I say we're a pretty big player in Danish broadcasting. We're the second biggest media company in Denmark.
Very good.
So we have a significant footprint.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you for that context. Okay, Robbie, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, so I'm Robbie Harrison. For 16 years, I was the senior engineer and broadcast systems manager for one of the largest commercial radio groups in the UK, looking after the national radio stations and mainly their play out, because in the UK, most of the transmission's actually outsourced, so we don't get too involved in that. I left there just before Christmas, and now I'm a director of a company that provides broadcast systems support and consultancy in the UK.
It's a great company title, Safe Pair of Hands. Huh?
Thank you.
Okay. Well, welcome aboard, Robbie. And last but not least, Philippe Generali. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Thank you for putting that panel together. We really are thrilled to be talking to such an eminent panel of specialists here. So I'm Philippe Generali. I'm the CEO of RCS Worldwide. RCS has been in the business of providing broadcasters around the world for solutions to help them put their content on the air and make money with it. So today we have about 15,000 radio stations using our software. We're in 119 countries. I think the last one we signed was the Vatican not so long ago, and the FM is not big compared to their internet station. It's one of those stations when the Pope speaks on the internet, I can guarantee there's a few people listening here and there. So anyway, so we're always excited by having a broadcaster using our software and helping them solve their problems and find a better way to do the operation. So here's to a good panelist. Let's go.
All right. Thank you, Philip. And Philip, since you got your mic open already, I know you have a story to tell regarding cybersecurity preparedness, and I think you even have a video to share at some point. Do you want to just keep the mic on and tell us a little bit about that context?
Sure. So first of all, the topic of continuity and stay on the air and avoiding the not having anything going on at the blackout, the dead air, and all this. I'm going to make a confession here. I haven't touched a microphone and been on the air for about 35 years now. But once in a while, I have this nightmare where I'm putting a vinyl on the turntable and then it runs out and there's nothing coming out after. And I wake up in a sweat saying, oh my God, that was before computers were helping us there. And it's true. So this nightmare doesn't get as recurrent as it used to be when I left the on-air duties. But anyway, so continuity and having no dead air and trying to service the listeners as much as we can is something that's dear to my heart. So we have an example. Yes, a little story. Hurricane Helene slammed the Atlantic coast of the U.S. on September 24. If I read my notes, it was September 24. It was a Category 4 with winds of 220 kilometers per hour, which is like for our U.S. viewers, about 130 miles per hour. Basically, it hit North Carolina, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia. It was really bad, and it actually made the national news, of course. But there's one particular story that made the national news, which involved a radio. Steve, do you want to play that thing?
We just started listening to the radio, and the radio was our only way of communication. We had no cell phone service. Nobody did.
And what service there was spotty at best. When people were able to make a call, they got word to the best megaphone in western North Carolina.
Welcome back to our continuing coverage of the rescue, recovery, and relief operation.
In the middle of this modern climate change disaster, the calls for help were answered old school.
Well, I'm trying to get a hold of my aunt and uncle out in Weaverville, and I can't get a hold of them.
For days, WWNC's AM radio host Mark Starling and his producer Tank Spencer served as a proxy dispatch service, helping to coordinate wellness checks and connect the stranded with nearby resources.
I want to put you back on hold so that Tank can get your phone number. We didn't have any connection to the outside world except our radio stations, and we were the only two here. So we kind of had a mission of like, okay, well, we've got to walk these people through the storm.
That's amazing. I mean, this story still gives me goosebumps just listening to those guys dedicated. Those two guys were behind the microphone for hours and hours and hours, picking up calls from people trying to find their loved ones and their pets, their kids, whoever was missing there. The market most gravely hit was Asheville, North Carolina. As it happened, this particular market was in the process of moving their station to our Zeta Cloud service, which was replacing the on-prem software. So this story is about a station that has made the whole leap towards all cloud operation. But if you have on-prem completed by a disaster recovery cloud operation, it's pretty much the same principle. They needed to broadcast to citizens. They wanted to help people, so the local staff was able to acquire a Starlink internet connection for the studio, and they began broadcasting emergency audio to the citizens who were without power, without internet, and many of them without cell phone. So our CTO, Chip Jellison, bumped a new feature. It still had wet paint all over the feature, but it was such particularly needed at that time. So he put the feature live, and we put it to the test right away. So the feature in this particular case is called Station Takeover. It allows a single user to select stations either one at a time or by group, and pick a source of audio and immediately take over a station broadcast and streams, and one at a time or in bulk return to normal programming. This is the power of centralization. So the audio needs not be in the market. It can come from anywhere where there is talent, and that is in a safe location. In this case, however, they had power in the studio. Those guys had some, gas and a good old power generator to get the studio going, and they chose to go live from there with the disaster around them. So they were really in the heart of the action, and it could have been done from anywhere. But kudos to first of all our dev team for the feature, but mainly to those guys on the ground to make radio what it's really supposed to be. It's a link between listeners, the first social media, right, where everybody is listening and communicating to each other.
Absolutely. Philippe, we've heard so many stories, especially like I'm in America, so I'm just going to talk about the things that I've recently heard, just not even recently, over the years, out west in California and Canada, the fires, right? The last 2 summers of fires. And we always hear stories about the first thing people lose is their power. The next thing that goes is the cellular, and they get in their cars and they turn on their radio. And so they can learn, like, all right, is the storm heading my way? Do I have to evacuate? We saw the same thing here almost 12, 14 years ago at Hurricane Sandy in New York City. We were on generator power for 6 days. We lost power. Everybody lost power. People didn't know if you were in an evacuation zone. The City of New York website crashed that posted the evacuation zones. So no one knew if they had to leave Brooklyn or wherever. And we had that map. We did a Google Maps mashup, and then we went on the air with that and directed people. All right, if you're in zip code 10007 to 10014, you need to leave now. And there's so many instances of that. And I have to turn over to Roz, because I know Roz came through Hurricane Helene and then the one right after that as well. And I know you had a great performance in that from an aspect of staying on the air. Could you tell us a little bit about your side of the story, as Philippe did with the North Carolina story?
Well, sure. But I would have to say that you can see in my title or the headline there, I say Tampa, Florida. I live in Tampa, Florida. So it's not the first time at the rodeo for hurricanes over the course of years. So this past year was another one that was multiple hurricanes. It was Helene, followed by Milton, and so on and so forth. I live here, so I know what it's all about. I personally was on generator for over 2 weeks at my house. But, just to step back from all of that, I would say that in any sort of a disaster, but hurricanes especially, hurricanes are very unique in the fact that it's the whole region. It's not even just a city. It's regionalized. And so when that happens, it affects the people, it affects the entire resource of everything. And then you have in the middle of all that, a lot of people, as you mentioned, Steve, getting in cars, and it's just a whole thing. So it's very hard to manage through those things, because you're dealing with the first thing we worry about are the people. I'm talking about our staff, but also the community. So people first, always. And then during those sorts of things, it's how do you communicate to these people? So that's a very critical thing to know. Where are your people? What are their plans? Where are they dispatched to? And how can you maintain some sort of communication with them? Because as you said, cellular goes down, all sorts of things that we take for granted, they're not there anymore. So we have a whole system on that's a standalone communications methodology that reaches people, and we can confirm. So we have a back and forth to confirm their status. We learned about that during Katrina, which was a major disaster, as we know. But it displaced people and couldn't tell, are they okay or not? Where are they? And do they need help? So that's our key thing. People first, and then we go into all of the technology. And as Philippe mentioned, the modern world has so many things that we can pull, different levers, and how to maintain operations. But during some disasters such as that, what's really key to the audience is what is the information at that moment? What is important now? Content is king. How can we get the right information from the professionals that know the facts, not speculation? And also, as you saw in that video clip, people are calling in with information. So it's a whole thing where the radio stations become core because people, as you said, Steve, are in cars, or they may just have a battery operated radio, even crank ones. I should have had it ready on display here, but crank it up and listen to your stations. But all of that stuff needs to be available. So how do you prepare for that? Well, I think that it's all into preparation, the testing. I don't want to ramble too much at the moment, but I think you'll cover some of this later, Steve. And what is it that we do? How do we manage that? But to kind of boil the ocean just a little bit on the technology side, we really have content, whether it should be live in some cases. It depends on the event. It could be just your building is impacted. So then the community doesn't need to know about your building, really.
That's often the harder one to prepare for, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, everything is normal to everybody else, right?
Right. So you're displaced, and so generally speaking, anytime you go to an alternate capacity, there's some reduction in capability or normalcy, right? So everything's running a fine-tuned machine, and then you put the space saver spare tire on your car, and now all of a sudden you can't drive, interstate speeds. Maybe that's an analogy. I like analogies, but so you have the content. How do you get the content transported, and then how to your broadcast endpoints? I'll call it that. Could be a tower, could be an antenna, but don't forget we have digital, as Steve or Philippe mentioned. There's digital content streams, and I think in traditional logic or thinking through, sometimes we forget. If we pick up our operation and move it somewhere, we need to take it into account. There's a lot of people that are receiving our content over digital channels, and we have to think that through. How is that managed? And I will say it in one broad statement: technology is your friend. So we go through people, process, technology, those three legs of a stool, which I'm saying we'll probably let that sit for a minute. Because each of those are critical that we review that, because all three of those change they're changing constantly. But if you don't review those at least yearly, you're kidding yourself when you get surprised by something unexpected and out of the normal environment.
Right. I'll drill down just a little bit on that, Roz, before we go open it to others. The whole, I love the idea of, like an annual review. Where are you? I remember just before the pandemic and when the world shut down in the year 2019, we looked at our business phone system, and it was a digital phone system, but it wasn't IP based. And it was like, it's time to modernize this. And we did it. We did it within that year. It was a capital expense. We have about 350 people here in this building. And but we did it. We finished it by the end of 2019. Then the world shut down, right? And nobody could come into the building. So how are you going to screen calls from home? Well, it's an IP connection. Just, if you have an IP connection at home, bring the call screener home. We were able to do that. If we hadn't have even touched that system, we would have had to risk our people's health by having them come into the building to sit behind a computer, take calls and things like that, because we needed to take calls. People had questions. People needed to vent. People needed to talk, and we needed to, like Philippe said, it's the early social media, right? But because we modernized our system, and we were able to do that. I think back 25 years now. Believe it or not, 9/11 occurred 25 years ago, right? And we were evacuated. We were in the shadow of the World Trade Center. We lost our transmitter site, which was the World Trade. Our studios, we had to move. We had to go basically to a news bureau for a month in somebody's office. But we couldn't take calls there. It's a news bureau. There was no hunt group or anything like that. But back then it was all key phone systems and early digital. And so we had to bifurcate our company. We sent for our call-in shows. We hijacked another station. We basically stayed at another station for that month and did our call-in shows there. It was all very physical, right? And you had to move people. You had to go where the technology was. Now, if we modernize, the technology can come to us. And you're right, Oz. You can pull those levers and just act on those things.
Yeah, real quick, Steve, don't mean to take over here, but every investment, you mentioned capital investment. So I believe it's super important that when we look at capital investments, we have a variety of those, but we also should always look at, okay, what does this provide for alternate capacity resiliency features that could benefit the entire organization versus one thing? I could give a million examples, even up to antennas. So we have to, I think technology has helped us in all of those things, but that's a lens that I would highly recommend everyone look at. What does this do for resiliency, scalability, flexibility, all of those sorts of things as you invest cold hard cash? Make sure it's going to pay other things, not just the focus of what the purpose is of that particular investment.
Yeah, great points. Very great points. Hey, Robbie, I know you managed playout for a large broadcaster. And did you, where was your thinking when you were, I know you went through various transitions of systems. How did you plan out for resiliency and for all of that major footprint your company had?
Well, the main thing was that when I first started looking after it, and as various acquisitions and things like that happened, at one point we had 4 different playout systems in one building, which made disaster recovery almost impossible, really.
Right.
So the primary thing that we did was just to get that down to 1, which luckily we did probably a few months before the pandemic, really. So once we'd done that, we had access to tools like Zeta to go to do everything remotely. So we were able, whatever happened with that building from a people access point of view, which had bitten us before because that building was in the middle of Soho. We had things like bomb scares, nothing to do with the building, but round the corner and things like that, which meant that people couldn't get anywhere near. And we'd had some trespassers in buildings next door where the police had locked the area down. So there was a few times where it was quite handy to very easily not be in the building. So we were already quite prepared. So when the pandemic happened, everyone just went home and recorded as live into Zeta to go. And you wouldn't really know because it was being done so close to time. Everything was still relevant and it kind of just carried on as far as the listener was concerned as it was.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Did you besides the planning, did you test those systems? I mean, that's frightening to have a bomb scare and nobody can get into the building. I mean, I don't know how you plan for that, but I guess you do drills. Did you do drills or anything like that?
No, that was quite early on that was probably a good 12, 13 years ago when that happened. But central London as well is notoriously unreliable for things like power and things like that. So you always had to be a bit prepared. But one lucky thing was that there was some smaller stations that we were kind of running as we were experimenting with them, and we had people broadcasting from home already using this this thing of just voice tracking as live. When I say as live, I mean they were recording some of those links 45, 30 seconds before they were going out on. It was almost live. So we were doing it already, which was great.
Wow. So you were well prepared for the pandemic.
Yeah, but also it meant that the programming team bought into it because the programming team were using it already. As soon as we started doing some of the smaller stations, they were like, "Oh, actually, that works really well. It is okay if some of the bigger radio stations do it." Mm-hmm. I think because we brought everyone on the journey, which is really important. And my background is in programming as well as engineering, is that I think when you bring everyone on that journey, this is a much easier sell. I think it's much better to have a bit of pre-planned chaos than it is that all of a sudden there's a complete disaster. Right. And I think just doing those little bits gradually over 10 to 15 years really gets everyone at least working in the same direction.
That's an important point, and I think I have to confess sometimes I miss that as a technologist. You gotta get the people involved, right? And you have to have them buy into the system and understand the why. I think Roz mentioned the why before, and you have to do that. And frankly, I didn't even think about acquisitions before. That frightens me. You have 4 different systems in a building because of acquisitions. It's great when companies grow and like this, but from the technology and from a resiliency perspective, that can be a real challenge. Nice.
Yeah, we certainly had various disaster recovery systems all over because the way I worked, there was like one kind of the big building in London, but then there was maybe 20 to 30 other smaller buildings. So there's plenty of places to put disaster recovery. Right. But you had to really think about it because of all of the different systems and making sure that then you didn't disrupt what was going on in those buildings by putting things in.
Right. Yeah. Amazing. Hey, did we lose Morton? I don't see him on our screen. Is Morton? Are you here still? Oh, all right. It looks like the bandwidth got the best of Morton. Let's see if we can get him to rejoin. But I did want to on the theory of planning for this. I know in America we call it tabletop exercises, and I know that's not an international term, so we can call it also like scenario planning or emergency planning. That's Roz, I know that's part of your title, I think, business continuity planning. As Robbie mentioned, getting the people involved, is that part of your role to take it to the people?
Absolutely. And back to Robbie's comment, really, the content people and business continuity planning. I remember it was decades ago when we implemented that as a company. And they asked, what are your disaster plans? So I had if this transmitter, I had the tactical things, right? Technical things. We do this and this and the other. And it's like, well, no, we need to zoom out and look at this as the whole business. So what's key and vital is that when you have, we call it crisis management team. So there should be some spokesperson for each facet of the business, content, sales, everything about it, right? So you have a slim team of leaders, decision makers that need to come together, and you walk through a story, basically, and you just say, at this moment, this is happening. That's all you know. And then next page, however you want to play it out. If it's a hurricane, you see it coming, this, that, and the other. If it's a building fire, so every scenario has a different story. But you walk that through, and what you'll find is, once again, people, process, technology. What are your people doing? Do they know what to do? Because people change. You have people that are hired in that are new. People change jobs, whatever. That's always moving around, and so people may assume things. And then the process workflows are broken. What about that process? How are you going to compensate for that process so that can keep the operations going? So every scenario has different tentacles about that. And then, of course, technology. What can occur if you don't walk this through in a routine, whatever the schedule. Yearly is probably about all that the business can manage, I think, really, because it does take time. Yeah. But when you sit around a table, that's why we call it a tabletop, and you walk through the scenario moment by moment with only the facts that you know at that moment. It's a pretend story. Then you'll find generally that people assume, well, I'll just do it remotely. Well, how are you going to do that? So there's a rule that we always reinforce. If you have never done it before and it's not been tested, it doesn't count. It becomes a good idea. And then you write that down and you test it, right. Build it. And so I'll even say basic stuff like, hey, I've got all my data backed up. Okay. Have you ever restored that data? Right. Ever? Okay, that's like an IT thing, but then it's kind of like testing generators, right? Are they testing weekly or whatever? And have you really put the building on generator?
Right. You test
what happens? So what you'll find during a tabletop exercise, there's assumptions, there's people that have no idea and then there's masters of this, and they'll know exactly what to expect. They'll know the compromise to the business when you go into a certain mode of alternate capacity. But when you bring all that together and you document it and you exercise it, it's well worth it. And it's such a learning experience because I have to tell you, not everybody knows what happens in the technology world, what kind of additional levers they have to pull, and what that means to them. But at any rate, that's in a summary, high level. We try to do that yearly. We do a cyber story, and we do an other story. So if you're hurricane prone markets, you need to do a hurricane thing. But things like I don't know, there's a bunch of scenarios for shelter in place. Well, in other words, the building is locked down for whatever reason, no one in, no one out. What do you do for a period of time? And how do you let people know? How do you communicate? That sort of thing. Right. Then the other general idea is the building has to be evacuated, and there's some compromise to the facility at that location. These are big general topics. You can imagine a building fire or this or that or the other. And then how much damage you put in the story is up to you. And then the other stuff, like I said, hurricanes are unique in that it's impacting people, it's impacting a large area, it's very disruptive, and the recovery is very interesting. So, one more general topic, and I'll stop rambling. When you look at these sorts of events, you have an incident, so it's very sharp. You have an incident, and the crisis management team has to manage through that. That's measured in hours, let's say, and you engage whatever you're doing. And then there's a long tail of recovery. We've gone through, as you mentioned, I'm the tornado attractor guy, but I won't take responsibility. We had an F5 take out a tower, a very tall tower here in Florida years ago. And, that's a long tail recovery to get completely back to normal is 2 years. So in the middle of that, you have all sorts of things you're doing. And then other things that are much shorter is a building flood, roof gets ripped off and water's pouring into your transmitter site or something like that. We've had all of the above, but so recovery is a longer tail, but the incident response and how you communicate and how you pull the levers quickly, that's so important. And then the recovery becomes more of a you can noodle over the options and recovery plan and all that stuff a little bit at a different pace. I'll say it that way.
Sure. That's amazing detail, Ross. Thank you for that. I just to embellish that a little bit, I went to a very interesting scenario plan with a cyber group, and hacking is everywhere now, right? And this was a really well done exercise where there were basically media companies in the room, say 50 companies, print, radio, TV. And the scenario was that a journalist like Twitter account was hacked, or no, I guess it was like it was maybe a whole like password vault for journalists was hacked, and now all of a sudden, and you had a foreign state taking over journalists, social media posts and things like this, and how do you respond to that? How do you recover from that? And I know a big part of this, probably that's part of your business continuity planning, Roz, is that you have a legal representative there, as well as a public relations person, because you have to get out to the public for just protecting your brand. That saying that, look, if it's a disaster, we're going to be back on the air as soon as possible. Somebody's handling that. If it's a hack, you could say that, this is an impersonation, and we're working through that. But so there's many different scenarios to play.
That's right. Yeah, communication is listen, we're in the communications business, but that's always a gappy thing. But internal communications and external, they're clearly very sensitive things. But if you don't communicate, you've failed. So you have to communicate. But how that's managed in those ways, you're exactly right. There are, legal, especially cyber and all this other, really anything.
Sure.
The company has to represent itself. I'll make one quick comment. We had another tower that got hit by a helicopter years ago that went down, and the TV stations, everyone's on site, and someone's out there from the company, and they were making comments, on TV, which no facts to understand what happened, and you don't want to do that because speculation is not good. So you do need to keep it, keep communications clear, accurate, and make sure it's representing the reality of the situation and not speculation. That's a whole big thing about communication.
Right. That's great. And that's why we have PR professionals to handle that. That's great. But we have to lean on them. We have to include them in our planning too. Very good. I see Morten is back. I hope you're in a good connectivity area, Morten.
Yeah, me too. I'm sorry.
Great. So Morten, we've been talking a lot about how we've recovered from disasters, how we've gotten through disasters, how we serve the public, how we plan for disasters. You have a large footprint with JFM. Can you tell us a little bit about how, a little bit of tips about how you've planned for resiliency of your broadcasts?
Well, we spent a significant amount of money over the last years improving our chain of broadcasting, and I can only encourage everybody to take this in consideration when building stations, both with backup power generator for the on-premises equipment and backup systems to keep your station on air. It could be such as a microwave, STL, and much more, just to be able to get something on air because content, as Roswell said, is crucial and important to the public. Most of our hosts currently is located elsewhere than on the station during their shows. We basically only have one show that gets into the station every day and make their morning show. And it's been like this almost since COVID. We believe that it leaves us with the best resilience if we can get some sort of attack. And since we're a large-scale media company in Danish terms, the work with the continuity plan is a task we were given from our CEOs. Keep the media alive almost no matter what, because when it comes to public trust, we are met with quite high expectations. So we do monthly tests and threat scenario tests to make sure everybody knows what to do and what to do when and when to do what.
Amazing. I think, Morten, you've uncovered a paradox in my thinking, especially since COVID. Here, so it's pre-2020. We've all spent a lot of capital on our resiliency of our plants. We've got a 0.5 megawatt generator sitting a few floors above me here. We've got a 250 kVA UPS conditioning the power and holding us up in the event of a power fluctuation to get to the generator. We've got all sorts of connectivity to our transmitter sites, but then COVID comes and we've now got, like you said, most of our talent still working at home, and without all that resiliency that we've built so carefully in place. Now, if there's a power fluctuation, they're off the air. We've sent, at least we couldn't afford to do it with everybody, but say for like the top 10 presenters, we've sent, we've shipped like 1 kilowatt UPSs, uninterruptible power supplies, to their homes. And so now they've got like a small refrigerator sitting next to their desk, and it's conditioning their power, and it'll keep them up for maybe an hour or so if they happen to lose power. But I'd like to ask the group, how do you? It seems to be a paradox that we've gained something by pushing the people out of our technical plants, but I think we've also lost something for resiliency. Any thoughts on that from anybody here?
Well, I think it's very important. Sorry.
Go ahead, Robbie. Go ahead.
I think it's important to make sure that there's some kind of standards in the kit that people are using, because there is a temptation just to go on Amazon and buy a cheap microphone or something and just plug it into a computer. So certainly, I think in some places the technical standards have fallen, and we have lost some of that. The live stuff, as good as the live stuff is, it sounds live. There is something about how someone sounds when they walk into a radio studio and you hear that it does sound like a different show. So yeah, I think standards are important still.
Sure. Philippe, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say there is the distribution of resources, which creates a safety. If not all your resources are in one location, particularly your talent, this is something which is in itself some kind of redundancy, because people are in various locations. It's very unlikely that something bad is going to happen in all those locations. So you create a safe place, safety net. And when we looked at the disaster recovery, and I'm speaking for the RCS disaster recovery, we said there are several scenarios. First of all, the people are distributed because they can't get to the studio, they can't be together, and we invented Zeta2Go, which is a way to basically take control of the automation system from anywhere, and you can collaborate, do voice tracks, and do all that. In a second step, there's the question of distributing your systems, your automation system, and having redundant automation system in various places. So this goes only so far. I shouldn't be saying that, as a matter of fact, because we like to sell system. But if you have two Windows-based systems that are sitting in two different rooms or in two different buildings, chances are they're going to be connected in one way or another. If you have a Trojan virus, like the CryptoLocker, for example, that there was, which was I think 3 or 4 years ago. The CryptoLocker was basically putting a wrapper around your media files, and it was propagating everywhere. And you have your media disappearing from your automation system, but it also propagates to your Windows system everywhere. And so your redundant system can be infected the same way. So it's a complicated situation, because you can't just say, oh, I'm going to turn this server and all the workstation and switch to that one. Well, guess what? The files were transferred on a Windows system. They're also encrypted, so there's no file there also. Yeah. So when we came up with the RCS disaster recovery, we said, what if we use the cloud? One of the cloud advantages is that there are few hackers that are hacking cloud system, because it's Linux. It's complicated to access. It's complicated to propagate. It's at the same time a robust system, and at the same time not as sophisticated as Windows. But a Windows virus will not propagate in the cloud because of the operating system. So by having files being constantly backed up from your terrestrial automation system in a cloud environment, you can really clean them, scrub them, and make sure everything is fine. And then when you need to go into disaster recovery mode, which, as Ross was saying, you get hit in the face, and every minute, if not every second, counts in the decision that you have to make. You don't have the time to restore a backup or anything. That's going to take hours. So you need the solution right away to get you going while you do the long tail of, if it's a virus, you're going to have to shut down every workstation across your entire organization.
Yep.
Run an antivirus one by one. And then if you have the machine of Fred, who is on vacation, that's turned off, you're going to have to make sure that you talk to this machine and you scrub it while he's on vacation, because otherwise when he comes back, he turn it on and something goes wrong. So the cloud will allow you to play from the cloud with an automation system in the cloud, and you sound okay. You have your voice track up to the minute before you had your disaster, your virus. You have your spots. You have your music. You have everything. At least you sound 99% normal for a few hours before it starts being a little poor content. But it buys you some time to do that long tail of recovery, which is well, you got to sleep 3 hours a night for a couple of nights. I tell you that.
I know you're speaking from experience, Philly.
Yes.
Sure. No. Yeah. I think we all have a little bit of PTSD from our experiences there.
Yeah, I'd like to just jump on Philippe's comment just a little bit about, how to recover and make sure things are where it needs to be during that recovery. He's describing a cyber incident, but, there's quite a bit that goes into, what is in place to detect and defend. Of course, I mean, I would hope and I would believe that everyone has all those sorts of things going on. But, one of the levers to pull is go into an isolation mode, right? So protect the nest or otherwise contain. You have to contain. But then the final thing, which you mentioned, is so-and-so has a machine, then they're going to turn it on. There is quite a bit of thought that needs to go into how do you qualify that everything is okay or back to normal, right? And that's a process, and that needs to be thought through, because it could look like it's okay, it could be fine, whatever. But every system, because all of our systems are a lot of automation going on, a lot of interdependencies, a lot of systems talk to each other in all sorts of ways, not just broadcast, right? So it's all linked, connected together in various ways. So how to reestablish the normal workflows and normal interconnectivity, it's so vital to have some thought put into how do you qualify anything, whether it's one computer or a system, to be back to normal. That's a key thing, and I think that should not be forgotten. It's right up there with backing up data and restoring data. It's similar.
That's a great point, Roz. And that could even include forensics, and you want to make sure that the threat actor is exfiltrated from your environment.
That's right. So just to say that real quick, I'm so glad you said that, because there's a conflict there. You need to grab the forensics before you wipe the machine and restore bare metal, right, to a known good. Mm-hmm. That's a whole nother topic. Where do you go back? How do you know what's good to restore, right? So there's that whole process. But yeah, I think understanding the forensics is a whole nother deal. And there are experts, of course, that are much more informed on that than I. But that's a step. It's right up there with legal, right? You need
Absolutely.
to make sure you get the breadcrumb trail figured out before you just randomly do things.
Yeah. And I will say, I mean, I don't know how many companies have that skill set on board. We certainly do not. So that's part of our cyber liability plan. We have partners queued up, basically everything from cyber liability, lawyers to forensics, and frankly, the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation for the U.S., is right across the street from me, for better or for worse. But we have a relationship there. They won't accept a cup of coffee from me, but we'll meet once in a while. And we there's a relationship there, as we do with like the local police precinct, but on the federal level for that type of work, because we don't have that skill set, but we've had to bring that skill set in, because you're right. Before you restore, is the restoration clean, right? It's a great point. We don't typically talk about that, so I'm glad we drilled down on that a little bit. Hey, we've got less than 10 minutes left. I want to just let the public know that if there's any comments or questions, please put it in the comment section. Looking at our synopsis, I did want to talk a little bit about field personnel safety. I think Philippe and Roz, you touched on that about your own people are the in a disaster. I want to touch on it from an aspect of just the day-to-day. And I'll start by saying, at New York Public Radio, we have a staff of about 60 journalists, and they're often in the field, and that's their job, basically. And sort of like the emergency responders, they don't run away from emergencies, they run into them. And the question is, how do you keep them safe? We've done a couple of steps. And really, we're just kind of starting to take these steps. But back in December, around Christmas time, there's something. It's a funny name, but it's a serious issue in America. It's called porch pirates. It's basically thieves. Especially around the holidays, they look at they go through neighborhoods. They see Amazon packages on the porches, and they steal them. So we had an investigative journalist basically order 3 items on Amazon, like, I don't know, a pair of sneakers or something, in smallish boxes. They opened the boxes, they implanted Apple AirTags in each of the devices. They sealed them back up with Amazon tape that we got from Amazon. And it's a virgin box sitting on a porch. And he put them out there, and then they were all stolen, but he tracked them, and he confronted the thieves. So I get a call like the day he's out in the field up in the Bronx, and it's like, Steve, we got this guy up, he's about to like confront this thief, and is there anything you can do to help him? And it's like, so we got on a Slack channel just to keep in communication, and a cell phone channel. And I told him, listen, we have, it's for lack of a better term, we have wearable a remote panic buttons. It's a I have one right here. It's a wrist device. You wear it on your wrist like a watch. Just opening it for a second. Sorry, I should have been prepared. This is it, and it's got a couple buttons on it, and from a format of escalating scenarios, you can, if you're a reporter, you go into your site, you can check in, and it basically, we preset this up in IT. It checks in with the support team, whether it's somebody in the newsroom, it could be myself, a director of physical security, could be even legal, but they can check in. And then in this case, the next day he took one of these and wore it, and then he tracked himself. You can push the button that says "Start tracking me," and then we can all see a live view of his footsteps, basically. And then when he gets to a touchy subject, like if he's confronting this thief, if he needs to, he can hit another button that's basically it dials emergency response. In America, it's 911. And as he does so, it also sends an emergency message to the support team. At that point, the watch turns into basically a wearable phone, basically. I'm sure in a year this is all going to be available on the watches, right? But this is what we have for now. And they basically so then if emergency response can get the message, they can see the GPS location from him, and he can speak to them. So we didn't need it, thank goodness. But that's one thing that we're doing just to protect the journalists in the field. The other thing I wanted to show briefly is you can get these. I can't open it because it's a one-time use thing, and once you open it, you have 15 minutes to use it. This is a wearable escape mask or escape hood. It basically gives you 15 minutes of clean breathing air in the event you're covering a protest or something, and tear gas is used or mace comes out or whatever. At least our reporters can basically open this up, throw this on, and get out of the area safely with good clean air. So I see. I'll let that go for a second. I see somebody asked a question here. Are there any parameters that your loss of business insurance carrier insists upon? And I don't know if I'm not sure quite how to answer that. Anybody have any thoughts to that question?
I guess it depends on the size of the business, really. I mean, certainly a lot of small business insurance here in the UK recommend that you get something like Cyber Essentials, which is a health check that you can do. But like a lot of larger businesses will just self-insure anyway.
Right. I mean, when for cyber liability insurance, that's a big thing now. We on an annual basis, we have to answer like 300 questions, and we have to provide documents. We're speaking about restorations. We have to show our restoration plan, our business continuity plan. We have to show all of that. So I guess that kind of falls under that as well.
In the US, I know that as a provider of software, we're sometimes being asked to be SOC compliant.
Right.
And the SOC compliance is a certain resilience to outside events and attempt to interfere in the chain of data, which could corrupt the data and result in loss of commercial played on air and things like that. So there's a few certification that we as a vendor need to have.
Right. Great point. Holy cow, folks! I'm the poor moderator. I lost track of time. Here it's 59 minutes after the hour. Before we get cut off or however this ends, I just want to thank everybody. This has been such a dynamic conversation. It's not typical that just the time flies by, but it sure did. And I think we've had a great dynamic discussion, a lot of actionable details that have come out of this. And I'll say thank you. If anybody has anything just for final words, I invite you to jump in at this point.
Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks everyone for the time, and thanks for watching.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks again for RCS for sponsoring this. Thank you all very much. What a great conversation.